You've been known to begin expressing your displeasure in a very roundabout fashion. James told me enough about scholars of the Therin Collegium, said Locke, to understand that their primary habit of speech is the booby trap. Ah, yes. When anyone tells you habits die hard, Locke, they're lying. It seems they never die at all. Barsavi chuckled and sipped from his wine before continuing. These are alarming times, Locke. This damned Grey King has finally begun to get under my skin. The loss of Tesso is particularly... well, I had plans for him. Now I am forced to begin bringing other plans forward sooner than intended. Tell me, Pezon, what do you think of Andres and Pachero? Well, my honest opinion, Your Honor? Full and honest, Pezon, by my command. Ah, they're very respected, very good at their jobs. Nobody jokes about them behind their backs. Jean says they really know how to handle themselves in a fight. The Sanzas are nervous about playing fair card games with them, which is saying something. This I could hear from 24 spies any time I wanted to. This I know. What is your personal opinion of my sons? Locke swallowed and looked Kappa Barsavi straight in the eyes. Well, they are worthy of respect. They are good at their jobs, and they must know their business in a fight. They're fairly hard workers, and they're bright enough. But, Your Honor, begging your pardon, they tease Nazca when they should be heeding her warnings and taking her advice. She has the patience and the subtlety that elude them. You knew what I was going to say, didn't you? I said you were a careful and considerate barista. Those are your distinguishing characteristics, though they imply many other qualities. Since the time of your prodigious early pop-ups, you have been the very picture of a careful thief, firmly in control of his own greed. You would be very sensitive to any opposing lack of caution. My sons have lived all their lives in a city that fears them because of their last name. They expect deference in an aristocratic fashion. They are incautious, a bit brazen. I need to make arrangements to ensure that they receive good counsel in the months and years to come. I can't live forever, even after I deal with the Grey King. The jovial certainty that filled Kappa Barsavi's voice when he said this made the hair on the back of Locke's neck stand up. The Kappa was sitting in a fortress he hadn't left in more than 2 months, drinking wine in air still wrapped with the blood of 8 members of one of the most powerful and loyal gangs. Was Locke speaking to a man with far-ranging and subtle scheme? Or had Barsavi finally cracked like window glass in a fire? I should very much like, Kappa, to have you in a position to give Andres and Pachero the counsel they will require. Ah, Your Honor, that's extremely flattering, but I get along well enough with Andres and Pachero, but I'm not exactly what you'd call a close friend. We play some cards every now and then, but let's be honest, I'm not a very important barista. As I said, even with the Grey King at work in my city, I have many who are tougher, more daring than you, more popular. I don't say this to strike a blow, because I've already discussed your own points. And it is those qualities they sorely need. Not toughness, daring, or charm, but cold and steady caution. Prudence. You are my most prudent barista. You only think of yourself as the least important because you make the least noise. Tell me now, what do you think of Nazca? Nazca? Locke was suddenly even warier than before. She's brilliant, Your Honor. She can recite conversations we had 10 years ago and get every word right, especially if it embarrasses me. You think I'm prudent? Compared to her, I'm as reckless as a bear in an alchemist's lab. Yes, said the Kappa. Yes, She should be the next Papa Barsavi when I'm gone, but that won't happen. It's nothing to do with her being a woman, you know. Her older brothers would simply never stand to have their little sister lording it over them. And I should prefer not to have my children murdering one another for scraps of the legacy I intend to leave them, so I cannot push them aside in her favor. What I can do, and what I must do, is ensure that when the time comes, they will have a voice of sobriety in such a place that we cannot get rid of it. You and Nazca are old friends, yes? I remember the first time you met, so many years ago, when she used to sit on my knee and pretend to order my men around. In all of the years since, you have always stopped to see her, always given her kind words, always been her good cousin. I certainly hope so, Your Honor. I know you have. Barsavi took a deep draught from his wine goblet, then set it back down firmly, a magnanimous smile on his round, wrinkled face. And so I give you my permission to court my daughter. Let's start wobbling, shall we? Said Locke's knees. But this offer was met by a counter-proposal from his better judgment to simply freeze up and be like a man treading water who sees a tall black figure coming straight at him. Oh, he finally said, I didn't expect. Of course not, said Barsavi. But in this our purposes are complementary. I know you and Nazca have feelings for one another. A union between the two of you would bring you into the Barsavi family. You would become Andres and Vachero's responsibility, and they yours. Don't you see? A brother by bonding would be much harder for them to ignore than even their most powerful barista. Barsavi set his left fist beside his right and smiled broadly once again, like a red-faced god dispensing benevolence from a celestial throne. Locke took a deep breath. There was no for it. The situation required absolute acquiescence, as surely as if the Kappa were holding a crossbow to his temple. Men died for refusing Barsavi far less. To refuse the Kappa's own daughter would be a particularly messy sort of suicide. If Locke balked at the Kappa's plan, he wouldn't live out the night. I'm honored, Kappa Barsavi. So deeply honored. I hope not to disappoint you. Disappoint me? Certainly not. Now, I know that several of my other Garistas have had their eyes on Nazca for some time, but if one of them were going to catch her eye, he'd have done it by now, eh? What a surprise when they hear the news. They'll never see this coming. And for a wedding present, the angry jealousy of an unknown number of tempted suitors. How and when should I begin, Your Honor? Well, said Barsavi, why don't I give you a few days to think it over? I'll speak to her in the interim. Of course, for the time being, she's not to leave the floating grave. Once the Grey King is dealt with, well, I would expect you to begin courting her in a more colorful and public fashion. You're telling me, Locke said very quietly, I should start stealing more. Consider it my challenge to you to go hand in hand with my blessing. Barsavi smirked. Let's see if you can stay prudent while becoming more productive. I suspect you can. And I know that you wouldn't want to disappoint me or my daughter. Certainly not, Your Honor. I'll do my very best. Papa Barsavi beckoned Locke forward and held his left hand out. Fingers outstretched, palm down. Locke knelt before Barsavi's chair, took that hand with both of his own, and kissed the Kappa's ring, that familiar black pearl with the blood-red heart. Kappa Barsavi, he said with his eyes to the ground. The Kappa pulled him up again by the shoulders. I give you my blessing, Locke Lamora. The blessing of an old man who worries for his children I set you above many dangerous people by doing this for you. Surely it has occurred to you that my sons will inherit a dangerous office. And if they're not careful enough or hard enough for the task, well, stranger things have happened. Someday this city could be ruled by Kappa Lamora. Have you ever dreamed of this?
Truthfully, whispered Locke, I have never desired a Kappa's power because I would never want a Kappa's problem.
Well, there's that prudence again. The Kappa smiled and gestured toward the far doors, giving Locke permission to withdraw. A Kappa's problems are very real, but you've helped me put one of them to rest.
Locke walked back toward the entrance hall, thoughts racing.
The Kappa sat on his chair behind him, staring at nothing, saying no more. The only sounds after that were Locke's own footsteps and the steady drip of blood from the gore-soaked bag around Federico's head.
8. Well, Master, if I were 1,000 years old and had already seen everything there is to see 6 times over, that still would have been about the last damn thing I'd have ever expected. She was waiting for him in the little hall beyond the foyer, once the clockwork mechanisms had sealed the door to the main hall behind them. She gave him a wry and apologetic look.
But don't you see that it would have been even stranger if I'd explained it beforehand? The whole mess would be hard-pressed to get any God's damn order.
Look, please, don't take any of this the wrong way. I don't take any of it the wrong way, Locke. You're a good friend, and I feel the same way, and yet it's hard to put this right. No, it isn't. Look. She grabbed him by the shoulders and bent down slightly to look right into his eyes. You are a good friend, Locke. Probably the best I have. My loyal peasant. I'm extremely fond of you, but not as a possible husband. And I know that you... Locke, I know that the only woman with the key to that peculiar heart of yours is 1,000 miles away, and I know you'd rather be miserable over her than happy with anyone else.
Really?
Locke balled his fists.
Seems like it's pretty common fucking knowledge. I bet the Duke gets regular reports. Seems as though your father is the only person who doesn't know.
Or doesn't care. Nazca raised her eyebrows. Look, it's Kappa that goes on. It's not personal. He gives the orders and you carry them out, in most cases.
But not this one?
I thought you'd be happy.
At least he's making plans for the future again.
I said reasonable plans. Nazca smiled, a real smile this time. Come on, Pezon. For a few days. We can go through the motions and put our heads together to come up with a way out of this. It's you and me we're talking about, right? The old man can't win, and you won't even know he's lost.
Right, if you say so.
Yes, I say so. Come back the day after tomorrow. We'll steam. We'll slip this loose. Now go tend to your boys, and be careful.
Locke stepped back out into the entrance hall, and Nazca pushed the door shut behind him. He stared back at her as the space between the black doors narrowed, gradually sealing her off from view until they slammed shut with a click of tumbling logs. He could have sworn she did just before the heavy black doors closed behind him.
And this is the card you picked, the 6 of Spires,
said Carlo, holding up a card and displaying it for the entrance hall guards.
Fuck me, said one of them. That's sorcery.
Nah, it's just the old Sons a touch.
Carlo reshuffled his deck one-handed and held it out toward Locke.
Care to give it a go, boss?
No thanks, Carlo. Pack up, lads. Our business here is finished for the day, so let's quit bothering the folks with the crossbows. He punctuated this with hand gestures, major complications to discuss elsewhere.
Damn, I'm hungry,
said George, picking up the cue. Why don't we get something at the last mistake and take it up to our rooms?
Yeah,
said Bud.
beer and apricot tarts.
A combination so disgusting I feel oddly compelled to actually try it.
Jean swatted the smallest gentleman bastard on the back of his head, then led the way as the gang made for the slender wooden path that tied the floating grave to the dust of the world. 9. Same Kappa Vassal, who imagined that Locke's gang merely continued sitting the steps a few days of the week, even with chains on his grave, no right people of Comor knew that the gentleman bastard still worked out of the house of Perelandra. Carlo and Galdo and Bug let rooms at various points in and around the snare, moving every few months. Locke and Jean had maintained the fiction of rooming together for several years. By a great stroke of luck, though whether it was good or ill had yet to be determined, really, Jean had managed to get them the rooms on the 7th floor of the broken tower. The night was dark and full of rain, and none of the gang were particularly eager to make their way back onto the creaking exterior stairs that staggered down the north side of the tower. Hissing rain rattled the window shutters, and the wind made an eerie rising and falling sigh as it passed over the gaps and crevices in the old tower. The gentleman bastard sat on floor cushions in the light of paper lanterns and nursed the last of their beer, the pale, sweet sort that most Comor natives preferred to the bitter Varari dark. The air was stuffy, but at least tolerably dry. Locke had given them the whole story over dinner.
"Well," said Galdo, "this is the damnedest damn thing that ever damned things up for us."
"I say again," said Jean, "that we should pull an early blow-off on the Don Salvara game and get ready to ride out a storm. This Grey King business is getting scary, and we can't have our attention diverted if Locke's going to be mixed up at the middle of things."
"Where do we cut ourselves off?"
asked Carlo. "We cut ourselves off now," said Jean. "Now, or after we get one more note out of the Don. No later." Locke stared down at the dregs in the bottom of his tin cup.
"We've worked hard for this one. I'm confident we can run it for another 5,000 or 10,000 crowns at least. Maybe not the 25,000 we were hoping to squeeze out of Salvara, but enough to make ourselves proud. I got the crap kicked out of me and Bug jumped off a building for this money, you know. And got rolled 2 miles inside a bloody barrel." "Now, Bug," said Galdo, "it's not as though the nasty old barrel jumped you in an alley and forced you to crawl inside it. And I concur with Jean. I said it this afternoon, Locke. Even if you won't seriously consider using them, can we at least make some arrangements to get you under cover in a hurry? Maybe even out of town?"
"I still can't believe I'm hearing a Sansa counsel caution," Locke said with a grin. "I thought we were richer and cleverer than everyone else."
"You'll hear it again and again when there's a chance you'll get your throat slit, Locke." Carlo picked up his brother's argument. "I've changed my mind about the Grey King, that's for damn sure. Maybe the lone lunatic does have it over the 3,000 of us. You might be one of his targets, and if Barsavi wants you even tighter with his inner circle, it invites further trouble."
"Can we set aside talk of slitting throats just for a moment?" Locke rose and turned toward the shuttered seaward window. He pretended to stare out of it with his hands folded behind his back. "Who are we, after all? I admit I was almost ready to jump into the God's damned bay when the Kappa sprang this on me. But I've had time to think. So get this straight. We've got the old fox dead to rights. We've got him in the palms of our hands. Honestly, boys, we're so good at what we do that he's asking the Thorn of fucking Comor to marry his daughter. We're so far in the clear, it's comical." "Nonetheless," said Jean, "it's a complication that could mess up our arrangements forever, not an accomplishment we can crow about." "Of course we can crow about it, Jean. I'm going to crow about it right now. Don't you see? This is nothing we don't do every day. It's a plain old gentleman bastard sort of job, only we'll have Nazca working with me to pull it off as well. We can't lose. I'm no more likely to marry her than I am to be named Duke Nicovanti's heir tomorrow morning." "Do you have a plan?" Jean's eyes said he was curious but wary.
Not even remotely. I don't have the first damn clue what we're going to do. But all my best plans start just like this. Locke tipped the last of his beer down his throat and tossed the tin cup against the wall. I've had my beer and I've had my apricot tarts, and I say the hell with them both, Grey King and Kappa Barsavia. Nobody's going to scare us out of our Don Salvara game, and nobody's going to hitch me and Nazca against our will. We'll do what we always do. Wait for an opening, take it, and fucking well win. Well, Jean sighed. Will you at least let us take a few precautions? And will you watch yourself coming and going? Naturally, Jean, naturally. You grab us some places on likely ships. Spend whatever you have to. I don't care where they're going as long as it's not Jerem. We can lose ourselves anywhere for a few weeks and creep back when we please. Carlo, Galdo, you get out to the Viscount's gate tomorrow. Leave some considerations for the boys in yellow so we can get out of the city at an awkward hour if we need to. Don't be shy with the silver and gold. What can I do? Asked Bug. You can watch our backs. Keep your eyes wide open. Skulk around the temple. Spot me anyone out of place, anyone who lingers too long. If anyone is trying to keep an eye on us, I guarantee we will go to ground and vanish like piss into the ocean. Until then, trust me. I promise to do most of my moving around as Lucas Fairwhite for the next few days. I can swap in some cheaper disguises, too. Then I suppose that's that, Jean said quietly. Jean, I can be your barista, or I can just be the fellow who buys beer and tarts when everyone else mysteriously misplaces their purses. Locke eyed the gathering with an exaggerated scowl. I can't be both. It's one or the other. I'm nervous, said Jean, because I don't like having as little information as I fear we do. I share Nazca's suspicions. The Grey King has something up his sleeves, something we don't understand. Our game is very delicate and our situation is very fluid. I know, but I follow my gut, and my gut says that we meet this one head-on with smiles on our faces. Look, said Locke, the more we do this, the more I learn about what I think Chains was really training us for. And this is it. He wasn't training us for a calm and orderly world where we could pick and choose when we needed to be clever. He was training us for a situation that was fucked up on all sides. Well, we're in it, and I say we're equal to it. I don't need to be reminded that we're up to our heads in dark water. I just want you boys to remember that we're the gods' damn sharks. Right on, cried Bug. I knew there was a reason I let you lead this gang. Well, I can't argue with the manifest wisdom of the boy that jumps off temple roofs. But I trust my points are noted, said Jean. Very noted, said Locke. Received, recognized, and duly considered with the utmost gravity. Sealed, notarized, and firmly imprinted upon my rational essence. Gods, you really are cheerful about this, aren't you? You only play vocabulary games when you feel genuinely sunny about the world. Jean sighed, but couldn't keep the slightest hint of a smile from tugging at the corners of his lips. If you do end up in danger, Locke, said Carlo, you must understand that we will ignore the orders of our barista and will bludgeon our friend on the back of his thick skull and smuggle him out of Camor in a box. I have just the bludgeon for the job. And I have a box, said Galdo. Been hoping for an excuse to use it for years, really. Also noted, said Locke, with thanks. But by the grace of the Crooked Warden, I choose to trust us. I choose to trust Chain's judgment. I choose to keep doing what we do best. Tomorrow, I've got some work to do as Fairwhite, and then I'll go see Nazca again the day after. The Kappa will be expecting it, and I'm sure she'll have some ideas of her own by then. Locke thought once again of his last glimpse of her, that wink as the two great doors of dark wood slammed shut between them. Maintaining her father's secrets was Nazca's entire life. Did it mean something for her to have one of her own that she could keep from him?
Chapter 5. The Grey King. 1. You seem to be spending a great deal of our money very quickly, Lucas, said Doña Sofia Salvara. Circumstance has blessed us, Doña Sofia. Locke gave a smile that was a measure of great triumph by Fairwhite standards, a tight-lipped little thing that might have been a grimace of pain from anyone else. Everything is proceeding with the most agreeable speed. Ships and men and cargo, and soon all we'll need to do is pack your wardrobe for a short voyage. Indeed, indeed. Were those dark circles under her eyes? Was there the slightest hint of wariness in her attitude toward him? She certainly wasn't at ease. Locke made a mental note to avoid pushing her too far, too fast. It was a delicate dance, playing straight lines and smiles with someone who knew he was a mummer but didn't know that he knew she knew. With the slightest sigh, Doña Sofia pressed her personal sigil down into the warm blue wax at the bottom of the parchment she was contemplating. She added a few flowing lines of ink above the seal, her signature in the curving Therin script that had become something of a fad among literate nobles in the past few years. If you say you require another 4,000 today, another 4,000 it must be. I am most sincerely grateful, my lady. Well, you'll certainly pay for it soon enough, she said. Many times over, if our hopes play out. At that she smiled, with genuine good humor that crinkled the edges of her eyes and held out the fresh promissory note. Oh, thought Locke. Much better. The more in control the Mark thinks they are, the more easily they respond to real control. Another one of Father Chain's old maxims, proven in Locke's experience too many times to count. Please give my warmest regards to your husband when he returns from his business in the city, my lady, said Locke, taking the wax-sealed parchment in hand. Now, I fear, I must go see some men about payments that will not appear on any official ledger. Of course, I quite understand. Conte can show you out. The gruff, weathered man-at-arms was paler than usual, and it seemed to Locke that there was a slight but obvious hitch in his stride. Yes, the poor fellow was clearly favouring a certain badly bruised portion of his anatomy. Locke's stomach turned in unconscious sympathy at his own memory of that night. I say, Conte, he began politely, are you feeling quite well? You seem, forgive me for saying so, troubled this past day or two. I'm well for the most part, Master Fairwhite. There was a slight hardening of the lines at the edges of the man's mouth. Perhaps a bit under the weather. Nothing serious. A minor ague, perhaps. They happen this time of year. Ah, one of the tricks of your climate. I've not yet felt such a thing myself. Well, said Conte, with an absolute lack of expression on his face. Mind yourself then, Master Fairwhite. Camor can be a very dangerous place in the most unlooked-for ways. Oh, ho, ho, Locke thought. So they'd let him in on the secret as well. And the man had a proud streak at least as wide as Sophia's to drop even the slightest hint of a threat. Worth noting, that. I'm the very soul of caution, my dear Conte. Locke tucked the promissory note within his black waistcoat and adjusted his cascading cravats as they approached the front door of the Salvara Manor. I keep my chambers very well illuminated to ward off miasmas, and I wear copper rings after false light. Just the thing for your hot and cold fevers. I would wager that a few days at sea will put you right. No doubt, said Conte. The voyage. I do look forward to the voyage. Then we are of one mind. Locke waited for the Don's man to open the wide glass and iron door for him, and as he stepped out into the moist air of false light, he nodded stiffly but affably. I shall pray for your health tomorrow, my good fellow. To
Too kind, Master Fairwhite. The ex-soldier had set one hand on the hilt of one of his knives, perhaps unconsciously. I shall most assuredly offer prayers concerning yours. Locke began walking south at a leisurely pace, crossing from the Isla Durona to Two Silver Green as he and Carlo had just a few nights previously. The hangman's wind was stronger than usual, and as he walked through the park in the washed-out light of the city's glowing elderglass, the hiss and rustle of leaves was like the sighing of vast creatures hiding in the greenery all around him. Just under 17,000 crowns in half a week. The Don Salvara game was well ahead of their original plans, which had called for a 2-week span between first touch and final blow-off. Locke was certain he could get one more touch out of the Don in perfect safety, push the total up over 22 or maybe 23,000, and then pull a vanish. Go to ground, take it easy for a few weeks, stay alert and let the Grey King mess sort itself out. And then, as a bonus miracle, somehow convince Kappa Barsavi to disengage him from Nazca, and do so without twisting the old man's breeches. Locke sighed. When false light died and true night fell, the glow never seemed to simply fade so much as recede, as though it were being drawn back within the glass, alone reclaimed by a jealous creditor. Shadows widened and blackened until finally the whole park was swallowed by them from below. Emerald lanterns flickered to life here and there in the trees, their light soft and eerie and strangely relaxing. They offered just enough illumination to see the crushed stone paths that wound their way through the walls of trees and hedges. Locke felt as though the spring of tension within him was unwinding itself ever so slightly. He listened to the muted crunch of his own footsteps on gravel, and for a few moments he was surprised to find himself possessed by something perilously close to contentment. He was alive. He was rich. He had made the decision not to skulk and cringe from the troubles that gnawed at his gentleman bastards. And for one brief moment, in the middle of 88,000 people and all the heaving, stinking, ever-flowing noise and commerce and machinery of their city, he was alone with the gently swaying trees of Two Silver Green. Alone. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and the old cold fear, the constant companion of anyone raised on the streets, was suddenly alive within him. It was a summer night in Two Silver Green, the safest open park in the city, patrolled at any given time by 2 or 3 squads of yellowjackets, with their night lanterns waving on poles. Filled, sometimes to the point of comedy, with the strolling sons and daughters of the wealthy classes, holding hands and swatting insects and seeking the privacy of nooks and shadows. Locke gazed quickly up and down the curving paths around him. He was truly alone. There was no sound in the park but for the sighing of the leaves and the buzzing of the insects. No voices or footsteps that he could hear. He twisted his right forearm, and a thin stiletto of blackened steel fell from his coat sleeve into his palm, pommel down. He carried it straight against his arm, rendering it invisible from any distance, and hurried toward the southern gate of the park. A mist was rising, seeping up as though the grass were pouring grey vapours into the night. Locke shivered despite the warm, heavy air. A mist was perfectly natural, wasn't it? The whole city was blanketed in the stuff 2 nights out of 3. A man could lose track of the end of his own nose in it sometimes, but why? The southern gate of the park. He was standing before the southern gate of the park, staring out across an empty cobbled lane at a mist-shrouded bridge. That bridge was the Eldron Arch, its red lanterns soft and ominous in the fog. The Eldron Arch leading north to the Isla Durona. He got and turned around. How was that possible? His heart was beating so fast, and then Doña Sofia. That cunning bitch. She'd done something to him, slipped him some alchemical mischief on the parchment. The ink? The wax? Was it a poison, drawing some cloud around his senses before it did its work? Was it some other drug, intended to make him ill? Petty, perfectly deniable revenge to sate her for the time being? He fumbled for the parchment, missing his inner coat pocket, aware that he was moving a bit too slowly and clumsily for the confusion to be entirely in his imagination. There were men moving under the trees. One to his left, another to his right. The Eldrin arch was gone. He was back at the heart of the curving paths, staring out into a darkness cut only by the emerald light of the lanterns. He gasped, crouched, brought up the stiletto, head swimming. The men were cloaked. They were on either side. There was the sound of footsteps on gravel, not his own. The dark shape of crossbows, the backlit shapes of the men. His head whirled. "Master Thorn," said a man's voice, muffled and distant. "We require an hour of your attention."
"Crooked Warden!"
Locke gasped, and then even the faint colors of the trees seemed to drain from his vision, and the whole night went black. 3. When he came to, he was already sitting up. It was a curious sensation. He'd awoken before from blackness brought on by injuries and by drugs, but this was different. It was as though someone had simply set the mechanisms of his consciousness moving again, like a scholar opening the spigot on a Ferrari water clock. He was in the common room of a tavern, seated on a chair at a table by himself. He could see the bar and the hearth and the other tables, but the place was dank and empty, smelling of mold and dust. A flickering orange light came from behind him, an oil lantern. The windows were greasy and misted over, turning the light back upon itself. He couldn't see anything of the outside through them. "There's a crossbow at your back," said a voice just a few feet behind him. A pleasantly cultured man's voice, definitely Maori, but somewhat off in a few of the pronunciations. A native who'd spent time elsewhere. The voice was entirely unknown to him. "Master Thorn." Icicles seemed to grow in Locke's spine. He racked his brains furiously for recall of those last few seconds in the park. Hadn't one of the men there called him that as well? He gulped. "Why do you call me that? My name is Lucas Fairwhite. I'm a citizen of Emberlane, working for the House of Bel Oster." "I could believe that, Master Thorn. Your accent is convincing, and your willingness to suffer that black wool is nothing short of heroic. Don Lorenzo and Dona Sofia certainly believed in Lucas Fairwhite, until you yourself disabused them of the notion." It isn't Barsavi, Locke thought desperately. It couldn't be Barsavi. Barsavi would be conducting this conversation himself, if he knew. He would be conducting it at the heart of the floating grave, with every gentleman bastard tied to a post and every knife in sage kindness bag sharpened and gleaming. "My name is Lucas Fairwhite," Locke insisted. "I don't understand what you want or what I'm doing here. Have you done anything to Grauman? Is he safe?" "Jean Tannen is perfectly safe," said the man, "as you well know. How I would have loved to see it up close when you strolled into Don Salvara's office with that silly sigil wallet under your black cloak, destroying his confidence in Lucas Fairwhite, just as a father gently tells his children there's really no such thing as the blessed bringer. You're an artist, Master Thorn. I've already told you my name is Lucas Fairwhite, and if you tell me that your name is Lucas Fairwhite one more time, I'm going to put a bolt through the back of your upper left arm. I wouldn't mean to kill you, just to complicate your life. A nice big hole, maybe a broken bone. Ruin that fine suit of yours, perhaps get blood all over that lovely parchment. Wouldn't the clerks at Miraggio's love to hear an explanation for that? Promissory notes are so much more attention-getting when they're covered in gore." Locke said nothing for quite a long while. "Now that won't do either, Locke. Surely you must have realized I can't be one of Barsavi's men." 13, Locke thought. Where the hell did I make a mistake? If the man was speaking truthfully, if he didn't work for Cover Barsavi, there was only one other possibility. The real Spider. The real Midnighters. Had Locke's use of the pretend sigil wallet been reported? Had that counterfeiter in Talisham decided to try for a bit of extra profit by dropping a word with the Duke's secret constables? It seemed the likeliest explanation. "Turn around. Slowly." Locke stood up and did so, and bit his tongue to avoid crying out in surprise. The man seated at the table before him could have been anywhere between 30 and 50. He was lean and rangy and grey at the temples. The mark of Camor was upon his face. He bore the sun-darkened olive skin, the high temples and cheekbones, the sharp nose. He wore a grey leather doublet over a grey silk tunic. His cloak and mantle were grey, as was the hood that was swept back behind his head. His hands, folded neatly before him, were covered with thin grey swordsman's gloves, kid leather that was weathered and creased with use. The man had hunter's eyes, cold and steady and measuring. The orange light of the lantern was reflected in their dark pupils. For a second it seemed to Locke that he was seeing not a reflection but a revelation, that the dark fire burned behind the man's eyes. Locke shivered despite himself. All that grey. "You," he whispered, dropping the accent of Lucas Fairwhite. "None other," said the Grey King. "I disdain these clothes as something of a theatrical touch, but it's a necessary one. Of all the men in Camor, surely you understand these things, Master Thorn." "I have no idea why you keep calling me that," said Locke, shifting his footing as unobtrusively as he could, feeling the comforting weight of his second stiletto in the other sleeve of his coat. "And I don't see this crossbow you mentioned." "I said it was at your back." The Grey King gestured at the far wall with a thin, bemused smile. Warily Locke turned his head. There was a man standing against the wall of the tavern, standing right in the spot Locke had been staring at until the previous moment. A cloaked and hooded man, broad-shouldered, leaning lazily against the wall with a loaded alley piece in the crook of his arm, the quarrel pointed casually at Locke's chest. Locke turned back, but the Grey King was no longer seated at the table. He was standing a dozen feet away, to Locke's left, behind the disused bar. The lantern on the table hadn't moved, and Locke could see that the man was grinning. "This isn't possible." "Of course it is, Master Thorn. Think it through. The number of possibilities is actually vanishingly small." The Grey King waved his left hand in an arc, as though wiping a window. Locke glanced back at the wall and saw that the crossbowman had disappeared once again. "Well, fuck me," said Locke. "You're a bonds mage." "No," said the Grey King. "I'm a man without that advantage. No different than yourself. But I employ a bonds mage." He pointed to the table where he'd previously been sitting. There, without any sudden movement or jump in Locke's perception, sat a slender man, surely not yet out of his 20s. His chin and cheeks were peach-fuzzed, and his hairline was already in rapid retreat to the back of his head. His eyes were alight with amusement, and Locke immediately saw in him the sort of casual presumption of authority that most congenital blue-bloods wore like a second skin. He was dressed in an extremely well-tailored grey coat with flaring red silk cuffs. The bare skin of his left wrist bore 3 tattooed black lines. On his right hand was a heavy leather gauntlet, and perched atop this, staring at Locke as though he were nothing more than a field mouse with delusions of grandeur, was the fiercest hunting hawk Locke had ever seen. The bird of prey stared directly at him, its eyes pinpoints of black within gold on either side of a curved beak that looked dagger-sharp. Its brown and grey wings were folded back sleekly, and its talons... What was wrong with its talons? Its rear claws were huge, distended, oddly lengthened. "My associate, the falconer," said the Grey King. "A bondsmage of Carthage. My bondsmage. The key to a great many things. And now that we've been introduced, let us speak of what I expect you to do for me." 4. "They are not to be fucked with," Chains had told him once, many years before. Why not? Locke was 12 or 13 at the time, about as cocksure as he'd ever been in life, which was saying something. "I see you've been neglecting your history again. I'll assign you more reading shortly." Chains sighed. "The Bonds Magi of Carthage are the only sorcerers on the continent because they permit no one else to study their art. Outsiders they find must join them or be slain." "And none resist? Nobody fights back or hides from them?" "Of course they do, here and there. But what can 2 or 5 or 10 sorcerers in hiding do against 400 with a city-state at their command? What the Bonds Magi do to outsiders and renegades, they make Kappa Barsavi look like a priest of Perilandro. They are utterly jealous, utterly ruthless, and utterly without competition. They have achieved their desired monopoly. No one will shelter sorcerers against the will of the Bonds Magi. No one. Not even the King of the Seven Marrows." "Curious," said Locke, "that they would still call themselves Bonds Magi then." "It's false modesty. I think it amuses them. They set such ridiculous prices for their services, it's less like mercenary work to them and more like a cruel joke at the expense of their clients." "Ridiculous prices?" "A novice would cost you 500 crowns a day."